Never know around here.
You never know. Never know. All right. Should be starting to go any second.
Make us go.
All right. There we go. We are live. Let me go.
We are live. What are you doing?
We're live.
We're live?
We're live.
Okay.
Or live. I'm on our Facebook. Season 5 is back. We're streaming live at www.betterpodcasting.com/live.
Still have the Facebook account?
Apparently. I don't know if anybody pays attention, but we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Okay. We'll see. Posted there. No, I don't want to publish an event. How dare you, Facebook? I said go with the original post. There we go. Okay. We'll see if it actually works. I don't know. Wait, did it go? Yes.
I have high hopes. I'm cautiously
You've got
optimistic.
high hopes.
You and the singing should have been a career for you.
Definitely not. Okay. Should I do the X or no? No X.
No.
I'll just put the season 5 and that'll be. We are live with the season 5 premiere, just for the last test, of the test premiere of Better Podcasting.
Oh, I see what you're doing. I see what you did there. I got a new hobby podcaster lens, by the way.
I like it.
Yeah,
What happened to the old one? The old one break?
No, it's still here. It's it's not plugged in, but it has a light. It's lighted, and it has a stand, and look down in case you're getting a splinter out or.
Nice. Hey, I have no clue for sure whether or not why is this not working? Come on. Anyways, I have no idea whether or not I don't know what I was going to say. Anyways, it looks like the site's not broken. That's what I was going to say, but I was going to say something else before I said that. So that's good. It's looking promising.
It looks like it's streaming.
And the site and the Gonna Geek site is not wanting to murder itself.
Murder sites.
All right, I guess we should do this.
Yeah, before it turns into September 26th and the show notes are not correct.
That would be a shame.
I'm Chris from Play Comics, a show where we look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that comic book source material. A part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other wonderfully geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to episode 304 of Better Podcasting, the season 5 premiere. On this show, we explore our next steps after our podcast media host discussion, talking about migrating your RSS feed.
In this week's Better Podnerings, topics include a new product from Rode, fake consumer reviews. Oh.
Or what's the record?
Go ahead again when you want.
Welcome to episode 304 of Better Podcasting, the season 5 premiere. On this show, we explore our next steps after our podcast media host discussion, talking about migrating the RSS feed.
In this week's Better Podcasting, oh my god, I could do a teaser fine. I could do a completely ad-lib teaser fine, but apparently I can't do our show. One more time.
Sure, no problem. Here we go. Yeah, are you ready?
I'm good.
Are you ready now?
No, go.
How about now?
I'm never going to be ready, so do it when you want.
Welcome to episode 304 of Better Podcasting, the season 5 premiere. On this show, we explore our next steps after our podcast media host discussion, talking about migrating the RSS feed.
In this week's Better Podnerings, topics include a new product from Rode, fake consumer reviews, and happy anniversary to you.
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we have some listeners who are feeling very punny.
Lauren, insert the pun here and start the show now.
This is Better Podcasting. We are hobby podcasters through and through, just like you. That's why we are different. We minimize the money talk so that you can focus on building a better podcast.
Welcome to the Season 5 premiere of Better Podcasting. I am Steven, and I am happy to say he has not quit on me yet because, let's be honest, he is the star of this show. He's SP.
Legally obligated by contract to be the star of the show, by the way, everybody. Happy Season 5, happy podcasting. We got a great show for you today because we are starting off our Season 5. But before we get there, our Season 4 was all about choosing a new podcast media host provider. And in episode 303 of Better Podcasting, we gave our hobby podcaster recommendations. There's 4 of them. It depends on what you want to do. There's Pinecast, there's Podbean, there's Spotify for podcasters, and there's Red Circle. So if you're looking for a new podcast media host provider or just starting your podcast off, I would put laser focus on those 4. Now, currently, I have migrated all 5 of my shows that I had on Libsyn, now to be named the podcast media host provider that shall not be named. I migrated them to Pinecast. 3 shows have been closed off in Libsyn, which means the accounts are now closed. Like, I won't be billed anymore. Technically, they're still active for a few more weeks, or actually just a few more days until the end of the month. But 2 shows are still in the validation and update process. We'll get more into that later. Now, if you missed the announcement last week or even last season, this will be a much shorter season than Season 4. This is because we're going to take our usual, what is now our usual holiday break, and we're slated to record through about mid-November with the final Season 5 episode releasing about November 24th, which I believe is the Monday before American Thanksgiving.
Now, let's talk a little bit about what you can expect for this season, Season 5 of Better Podcasting. Well, technically, let's talk about the general theme of this season. Technically, we have a theme because we are both technically a couple of technical podcasters. Are you getting the drift yet?
Alicious?
Yeah. Let's go with that. Somebody translate that, put that into actual words, and then that'll be a new verb here on Better Podcasting.
I can't wait to see the transcript on Apple Podcasts on that.
So overall, our theme for Season 5 is going to focus on some more technical aspects of podcasting. We're using the term technical a little bit loosely. This isn't going to be step-by-step instructions or anything of that nature, but we are going to focus on some of the more technical bits and pieces that we don't often get a chance to talk about here on Better Podcasting. This is something that you're probably not able to avoid as a hobby podcaster, but it's not something that you're always wanting to... Hold on. One sec. Hold on. One second.
All right. Dance, SP, dance.
Sorry, I'm just double checking. I don't have a weird package situation going on. I'm watching the camera.
We're okay. Well,
what happened
take care
was,
of it.
here, I'll put my earbuds back in. So what happened was Amazon, I think, is dropping something off. I saw them take a picture and then they took it back, and I was making sure nothing snaky was happening, but it looks like they just grabbed the wrong box. So I'm just going to grab the box anyways. So,
all right.
One second.
Well, see you in a couple of minutes here.
I'll be just a second.
The joys of live recording, everyone. It happens. It happens. If we were, so the final version wouldn't have any of this in it, but if we were recording and not streaming live, you wouldn't hear any of this. This is what happens from time to time as you're doing a meeting for work from home, something like that. I don't work from home, so I wouldn't know. I try to as often as I can, but that amounts to maybe 2 or 3 days a year. So I don't work from home. I have to go in for work. But if you were working from home and had a package delivered and then somebody was running away with it, with porch pirates being what they are, I didn't realize you had porch pirates up in Canada. I thought everybody just left their doors open and unlocked.
we're it's bad here too. But I thought something snaky was happening, taking a picture, and then anyways. But I did not have faith in humanity.
All right. Well, I would just back up and do the now let's talk a bit.
Okay. Was it solo? Probably solo.
You merged to solo, yeah.
Now let's talk a bit about what you can expect this season. Well, technically, let's talk about the general theme of this season. Technically, we have a theme because we're both technically a couple of technical techie podcasters. Do you get the drift yet?
I don't know if it's a drift, but it's definitely technologically capable.
So overall, our theme for this season is going to be more of the technical aspects of podcasting. No, this isn't anything like a step-by-step tutorial or anything like that. We are using the term technical a little bit loosely, but it's really going to be some of the more technical nuance, the bits and pieces of podcasting that we don't often get a chance to talk about on Better Podcasting, but you still can't avoid them as a hobby podcaster. So we're going to have some broader conversations in some areas, some more nitty gritty in others. And just to give you a little bit of a tease of some of the variety you might see, we have currently slated a topic about RSS feed migrations, hint today. We also have a topic, though, about podcasting trends. We have a scheduled topic about episode notes, and we also have a topic about social media. So hopefully this will give you an idea that there'll probably be something that you like this season, and we hope you keep listening for that. And while some of this will get into the weeds, we do hope that you will take away some value for yourself. And if you're also wondering, we are keeping around the Better Podnerings. We want to keep talking about some of the current events in podcasting, and this is something that we like better than the single topic Better Podcasting download, so we're going to keep that around.
Indeed. So, Stephen, shall we move on to our first How I Saved My Podcast story of the season?
I think we should.
Here's another How I Saved My Podcast story.
So I was talking with another podcast producer. It's my friend Sean. He has a show, Strange New Worlds Fancast, which I produced a season of, but it's his show, and he has the hosting on Podbean, and it was working just fine. And I just went to go check on it for, I don't know, whatever reason. I was probably thinking, hey, there's probably a new season of Strange New Worlds coming out. Turns out not until 2025. But I noticed that I was having problems playing any of the episodes in my podcatcher, whether it was Spotify or Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio. So I was like, hey, dude, what's going on, man? And he goes, oh, crap. That was being paid for by my credit card, which was stolen and then reported missing. And, you know, the numbers changed. He got a new card out of it and everything, but he forgot to go in and update his annual podcast payment. So that was in May. This conversation was just a couple weeks ago in September. Like, uh-oh, can this be savable? So obviously, Podbean had stopped serving up the audio feeds. For some reason, the podcatchers still had the show, the RSS feed, and the descriptions, you know, the actual posts on there. So on September the 1st, he did a renewal with an annual plan purchase. And oh my gosh, I don't believe it, Stephen. It actually worked. Everything came back. You're talking May to June, July, August, and then bingo, 1st of September. It had to have been over 90 days. That was a close call, in my opinion.
That seems like a real good faith move on Podbean's part.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in order for that, to be honest with you, it was probably just a few days away from being canceled because it was saved on the 1st of September. So maybe on the 2nd of September, it wouldn't have been. I don't know when they do the reviews on Podbean, but obviously they weren't serving up the audio files anymore, so you couldn't get the podcast. But instead of canceling it, the other flip side, though, is without audio files, the main podcast directories still had it listed and then picked up those audio files once it was renewed. So I think that was lucky, and I wouldn't want to have stressed it even another hour because I was like, how do you get that back? How do you get the subscribers back? You don't. It's just gone. So you want to make sure that you go in and make sure that your annual subscriptions, if that's how you pay for it, is up to date with the payment information. That's what I would do. And I do it monthly, so I would know much sooner than on an annual basis personally. If you're a Spotify for Podcasters customer, you don't necessarily have to pay anybody, but I would be checking that RSS feed from time to time. So that's kind of an unusual How I Save My Podcast story. We haven't covered this aspect of things before. Usually we're talking about backups. So if you, listener, have a How I Save My Podcast story, we would be grateful if you would share it with us so we could share it with everybody else. You can send us an email. You can hit us up on our Discord. What we would really love would be some sort of an audio or video recording. It could just be on your cell phone. It doesn't have to be anything special so that we could play it on the show. And because we do have a video portion of the show, so it would work out great there. But if you have a How I Save My Podcast story of something that's either backup related or non-backup related, we would love to talk about it on this show.
Now, should we get to our first featured segment of the season, SP?
I'm looking forward to talking about this.
The holy grail of open podcasting with your show is an RSS feed. The RSS feed, which stands for Rich Site Summary, or maybe real simple syndication, is a standard of code which allows your podcast files, titles, and descriptions, among many other podcasting namespace tags, to be distributed to podcatchers all across the globe. And RSS is at the essence of your show and should be guarded and protected as much as you can, if of course you want to participate in the open nature of podcasting through this method. It's because of this that migrating your show from one podcast media host to another might be very daunting for many podcasters, and it was for us too before we did our last season of Better Podcasting. Now, before we go any further, we get it. Let's just say this right now. If you're listening to this right now, you might not currently plan to change your media host provider, or maybe you're just starting to podcasting and you haven't even started podcasting yet and you don't have an RSS feed. However, we still will sprinkle in some RSS best practices in this discussion today so that hopefully you can take something away and use it on your show from day one.
Whether you have not yet started podcasting or you have 10 plus years of episodes behind your belt, there will be something in this segment about migrating your RSS for you. I guarantee it. Oh, and one last, before we get to it, note, as we said before, we are both of the opinion that the definition of a podcast is evolving and that ultimately the public will dictate what that term podcasting means. As such, we recognize some people may have a podcast that do not have an associated RSS feed with it, say if it's a YouTube show that you're calling it a podcast. While there's a bunch of discussion on this, we could have about why you may want to think about getting an RSS feed, even if you do have one of those YouTube channels or another video hosting means, or host your audio somehow that's not associated with an RSS feed. We're not going to get into that today. But we did want to acknowledge that point right now. Back to the RSS feeds. It's important to note that when podcasting started back in 2004, when the podcast term was coined, there were no services to create, maintain, and host podcast RSS feeds. There might have been RSS tools, but not anything specific to podcasting. As the podcast techies said back in the day, they basically had to, quote, roll their own RSS, unquote, by coding it themselves, which is something that Steven really likes to do. But over the years, more and more services were developed to create and host RSS feeds, leading to a mindset in the industry today to have your RSS on a service. Basically, the tech is being handled for you. Now, there are bandwidth considerations with your RSS as well that might lead to this mindset versus hosting your own RSS on your own server. So while you can create and maintain your own RSS feed, which we talked about in Better Podcasting, almost, I believe it was the first 10 episodes, you can also have the podcasters associate their feeds with the podcast media hosting service now and not have to worry about a lot of that back end stuff. So as we were saying before season 4, both of us were very cautious about migrating our RSS feeds. You try to say that 5 times fast. We had many what if concerns, including a primary focus on whether the redirects would work right, specifically being picked up by the different distribution platforms. However, throughout season 4, I had plenty of experience migrating the shows that I was working with from one media host provider to another, and that helped alleviate a lot of our collective concerns about how difficult or fast it was going to be. As such, both of us have now permanently moved a show or are in the process of permanently moving our shows from one media host provider to another. And as mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I'm still in the process of moving my final 2 shows away from Libsyn to Pinecast.
So if everything went all smooth, why are we talking about RSS migration today? Well, that's because, quite frankly, it was not as smooth as an Android bottom. No, not at all. There were some challenges that we ran into as we did the migration. There's a lot that we learned. And there's a lot that we thought we could share here for some best practices for RSS feed management in general to hopefully help you have a smoother experience if you do migrate. We also want to include some technical considerations you might have for best practices of maintaining that RSS feed for potential future migration. Now, because of this experience, we have formed some detailed thoughts about this topic. If you are thinking about possibly moving your show to a new media host, but you have questions, you're in luck, because in this episode, we're going to break it all down to a few main categories, including observations, experience, and best practices for moving your show from one podcast media host provider to another. And as a bit of a bonus, we'll help you know how to treat your RSS with love throughout the show. Throughout the how to treat your RSS with love throughout the run of your show so that you are hopefully in a better position, or at least your RSS feed doesn't gain its own mind and attack and, do all the AI things.
Like a transformer toaster?
Just like that.
Yeah, okay. Now, before we begin, we do want to preface this segment by saying we know that this segment is going to be a lot today, but since this serves as a little final cap to season 4, we're going to allow ourselves to be a little bit more long-winded in our segment than we usually are. So we're going to begin with observations while migrating our RSS feeds. We're kicking off with a no-brainer observation. Smaller shows with less episodes are going to be easier to maintain and to migrate. No duh, right? But it's true. Small shows have less episodes to verify, have a smaller size RSS feed in terms of file size that will have less hiccups while being imported to another podcast media host provider or maintained on the current podcast media host provider. It's easier to isolate issues if you do run into them. And if things require manual work, it's less clicks and or copies and pastes to actually transport the rest of your podcast RSS feed to a new place or maintain it. Now, observation 2 is that most destinations usually update within a few hours to 2 days. Now, what are we talking about? If you redirect your RSS feed, generally within 1 to 2 hours, the main destinations for podcasts update. We talked about it a little last season, just to capstone a few of them. Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, directories like that usually update within 1 to 2 hours, or at least that was our experience. Now, unfortunately, there are those that take maybe a day or two, which Podbean was consistent in that for me, at least. So I'll throw Podbean out for that. However, we're only talking a maximum of 2 days. At least that's what I experienced. So you're not talking about a month. You're not talking about a week. You're only talking about a couple of days. But that couple of days could be important to you if you have a daily show or if you migrate close to when you release your next episode. So just keep that in mind. And here's a semi-related bonus subpoint within this subsection of this question of this topic. You may be surprised of where you run into an issue getting the feed transfer. While overall things went smoothly for us most of the time, there was at least one occasion where something took us by surprise, even though it didn't cause problems in the past with other migrations. In this case, you may need to go into that service and give it a little kick to make sure that the destination is receiving the correct feed. And by that, we mean see if there's an option to prompt it to refresh the feed again.
Now, next up, let's talk about how larger RSS feeds might run into transfer limits with your new host. A podcast media host provider might have a limit on the size of the RSS that it can import. This was what we found specifically with Pinecast, and Matt from Pinecast had mentioned that the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. RSS feed was 12 megabytes, and he found that to be quite large compared to when compared to some of the other ones that he had seen. This was when SP first tried to import it. A larger RSS feed does provide more opportunities for these errors to occur. The total size will matter. The speed that it will take to scrape the RSS feed might be affected, and the import verification might vary from media host provider to media host provider, and that's why the larger RSS feeds can have a bit of problems compared to smaller ones. The RSS is also separate from the episodes in themselves, so keep in mind that downloading all of the episodes might run into issues as well. Of course, a larger RSS feed means probably more episodes in there, so you need to consider that as well, because you kind of got two possible things of going wrong: a large RSS feed and a whole back catalog of a bunch of episodes. Keep in mind, larger episode file size could affect it as well. There's more chance for errors to go wrong the more files that are being downloaded. And in some cases, the media host that you're importing to may have certain safeguards that they've put in to help handle these larger files or RSS feeds, and that might make it take longer to go through the process. For example, they might code their import process to only do a batch of episodes at a time. And if you have a large RSS feed with a large back catalog, that might mean that no matter how fast your existing media host is, it might just take a while if they are throttling it. And quite frankly, that's probably not a bad way for media hosts to treat a large download, because that might mean that the source feed, your old media host, probably has everything all at once. So don't be surprised if you have a large RSS feed with a large history if things go wrong or it feels like it's going wrong because it's taking a while. That's something we observed.
The more formatting in your feed, the more risk you run into of not being able to transfer your RSS. Copying your episode descriptions from a non-text editor, such as Microsoft Word or maybe a Google Doc, can insert characters that do not integrate well with RSS. Unicode characters are usually the culprit to mess up RSS feed, and HTML does add size to your RSS. Now, I was able to eventually get my Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. RSS size under 8 megabytes from the previously mentioned 12 megabytes by stripping out most of the HTML formatting. The size can increase dramatically with the HTML formatting, and when you do use formatting, it can sometimes be difficult to track down special characters as they may be invisible to the eye. At one point, Stephen took one of my feeds into Notepad++ and found all sorts of hidden characters that we didn't identify at first. And just a little spoiler alert, how I fixed this is I literally copied the descriptions from one media host. I put them into a text editor. I stripped out all of the formatting that didn't make sense or the hidden characters that popped up. And then I put that text file into the new podcast media host description. And that is how I was able to do it. Or if I hadn't imported the feed yet because I couldn't, I had to put that new formatting back into the original one. So it did take a while for me, especially with Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. that was over 500 episodes. The last observation we have is about your website. Now, quite frankly, we're going to say that you shouldn't plan on it being a smooth transition, right, Stephen?
No, whether you're using a media host or you are hosting your own neutral website, such as something like WordPress, it doesn't appear to us that that media hosts have really considered the fact that people might have a website migration part of the process. For example, if you are using a media host website, you can pretty much count on rebuilding all of your sections from scratch on the new platform. And if you're using a more neutral location, unfortunately, we've discovered that there's a lot of variance between the different media hosts and how they handle file structure or even file names. So you're probably going to have to do a lot of work on your website after the migration. This could include using batch replace tools, but that might not necessarily work either, depending on how the old media host formatted their directory structure and the new media host did. The other thing to consider as well is that website addresses often don't redirect that we found on media hosts. Yeah, we did see some where you could set up a redirect on your old landing page, but we saw that most media hosts were focusing on the RSS feed. So keep that in mind, that if you've bookmarked or have people bookmarked a bunch of links at your old media host location, it might not redirect to your new website.
The next observation we have will hopefully be a little bit more uplifting. After you migrate your show, there is a sense of accomplishment. You should be satisfied with either the features or capabilities or reduced costs of your new podcast's home. And while you may feel a lot of intimidation when you start on your journey of migrating your RSS, try to push through it and keep in mind this point. It will get better. And once you've done it the first time, you're not going to be as apprehensive to do it again, and you might make it easier on yourself by doing some pre-planning. And we're going to get into some best practices at this point in time, which include both migrating your RSS feed and just maintaining it as well. And this is a lot from our observations that we had because we really delved into our RSS feeds while doing this.
So the first thing that we're going to recommend is using an RSS validator. Make sure you throw your RSS feed through a validator, and it's actually probably not a bad idea to do that from time to time. This might help you find issues before you start the migration, and it will help you better maintain your feed. There are multiple RSS validators out there, and you might want to consider using multiple ones. For example, there's validator.w3.org/feed. There's rsboard.org/RSS-validator. There is castfeedvalidator.com, and there's podba.se/validate. These are some RSS feed validators, and we'll make sure to put them over in the notes over at betterpodcasting.com/304. And we want to really highlight that you might want to think about using multiple RSS feed validators, because we did find that there were different experiences depending on the feed and the validator. Some would show as a pass, some would show as a fail at different times of the cleanup. So keep that in mind. You might get different information depending on the one that you use.
Shorter show notes, also known as episode descriptions without HTML or special characters like Unicode, makes for easier transfers. We're going to have more on show notes or episode descriptions on a future show. This is going to be unpopular, but you may want to also avoid the emoji train at this time. We're not convinced that media hosts or podcast apps, for that matter, have fully considered this as far as how they handle emojis, and we did run into several issues, at least with the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. feed, that had emojis in it from feedback that was given to us and was just copied and pasted direct into the episode descriptions. And it was very frustrating to actually have to go in and to find those. So I, for instance, am not going to put any emojis in any of my future episode descriptions because of that. Now, follow the podcast media host directions when you're attempting to transfer your RSS. You may need to give your credit card and create an account first, but before you actually transfer, I would verify your episodes, descriptions, and metadata, and do this again before 301 redirecting your feed. Because once you've redirected the feed, then you are going from your nice stable configuration that you had for one reason or another, even if it was messed up on your old podcast media host provider. And then when you transfer it to the new one, that messed up feed might not work. And now you're troubleshooting the new feed when it was working fine right before your 301 redirected. That's why we're talking about validating the RSS feed and then verifying all the metadata and descriptions and episodes before you actually do the 301 redirect.
Now, the next best practice that we have is to save your RSS feed into a text file before you redirect it. For many feeds, you'll be able to take your RSS feed address, pop it into your Chrome browser or Edge, basically, sorry.
Living on the edge. It's a sharp edge.
The next best practice that we have is to save your RSS into a text file before you redirect it. For many feeds, this means you'll be able to take your RSS feed, copy it, and paste it into your web browser, such as Chrome or Edge, and then you will be able to save it from there into a file that you can open in a text editor if you need to later. However, we should caution that some media hosts have started to recognize browser requests and prettify it a little bit so that when you do put it into your browser, you'll get a little nice page that doesn't actually show your RSS feed. In this case, you might just need to look how you view the source. Sometimes it's as simple as typing in front of the URL view-source : Other times you'll just need to look around in your browser to find out how you do that so that you can actually save the RSS feed itself. Little bonus tip on this one, it's actually probably not a bad practice for you to occasionally export out your RSS feed into a text file. Yes, we hope you use a reputable media host that you can trust and everything, but if suddenly your media host were to go away, you might not have a backup of that RSS feed, or you might be hunting through some various websites to try to re-download it. So it's not a bad idea to have that so that if you were trying to pick up your pieces down the road, you had your RSS feed to reference back to if you needed to try to work with a new media host. Maybe they could take that file and import it for you or something. You never know what they're willing to do if you were in a bad situation. So it's probably not a bad idea to keep a copy of that occasionally.
And another best practice that we're going to talk about is your stats. If you're migrating, I would save your stats before downgrading your account or canceling the account. Your stats are not going to transfer to your new host. Any stat integration that you have with your current podcast media host is not going to transfer to your new host. Like if you have a YouTube integration for the stats to feed it back into your podcast media host provider. So your exact experience in this category is going to vary based on the media host that you have and what stats you want to preserve. For example, some media hosts have a lot of download function for stats. Others have limited. Some media hosts limit what can be downloaded compared to what they offer through the user interface or what you can see on the screen as you're looking at it. And if you do want everything, you may have to be doing a lot of print to PDFing or something like that, maybe screen captures. It's just going to be aggravating if you have the only way to view the stats on the screen, but it is what it is if you want to save your stats for future whatever you want to use them for. Now, another bonus tip here, put them in a couple of places. What are we talking about? We're talking about the backups for stats and the RSS feed and places that you're likely look to them later.
Here, watch that.
Thank you. And places that you're likely to look for them later. If you're not used to storing data raw like this, you may not have a go-to place to find this. After a while, you may forget where you put it. So put it somewhere you think you'll look. And also put it up on a cloud drive like Google Drive or OneDrive. It'll help keep them extra safe in case something happens to your computer as well. There's no going back on this. What you have is what you're going to have for your stats history. Now, we talked about this before, Stephen. I'm going to bring it up again. Triple check the 301 redirect URL before you implement it.
Yeah, double check it. Double check it, right?
Triple check it.
Double, right?
Well, you should check it, right, Stephen?
No, you should triple check it. You're absolutely right. Why are we making a big deal about saying triple? Because quite honestly, we're trying to put huge emphasis on it. And that's why I was awkwardly injecting there with SP, because you are going to really, really, really regret it if you mess up your RSS redirect process. So before you are going to actually press go, when you're setting up that redirect from your old location, you want to make sure that the new location is 100% accurate. And let's back up here a second, because for those of you who don't really know what a 301 redirect is, this is usually the way that a RSS feed is redirected from a past media host to a new one. The 301 redirect term is basically web standard jargon. That is the technical way that something will look at a website address and go, oh, that's not there anymore. I'm supposed to look somewhere else. And the 301 basically says, hey, this is permanent. In the web jargon, there's a whole bunch of different numbers of redirects, but the 301 just says, hey, this is a permanent thing. You should always go look at the new home. So we do recommend checking this 3 times at least before you set it up, because again, you will really, 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 really regret it if you make a mistake, because if you do put on a wrong 301 redirect, if you do put on a wrong 301 redirect and you hit transfer, it's going to be basically telling things to look somewhere that isn't actually accurate, and maybe you don't control that location, and it will be very difficult to get that redirect back.
It's like shooting a rocket out of the solar system, unable to recall it. Like Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, Voyager 1, Voyager 2, New Horizons. You might know the Voyagers more than anything else, but basically these probes are going out of the solar system and they ain't coming back. And that's what your RSS feed would be doing if you 301 redirect to an incorrect URL. Now, if you do put in an incorrect URL, you're going to have to work with each podcast directory to repoint your show at the correct RSS feed, or maybe create the RSS feed that you pointed your RSS to and redirect it back towards where it was supposed to be, either your podcast media host provider that you have, or if you're transferring to the new one. Either way, you might be able to do that. But unless you're really techie or pay somebody that's really techie to do it, that's going to be a long road to hoe there. And also, if you redirect to the wrong URL, you're not going to be able to, your listeners are not going to be able to upload new episodes to their podcatchers. You're not going to be able to upload new episodes to your feed because they're basically going nowhere because it's not pointed. The RSS feed isn't pointed at the podcatchers correctly. And existing episodes won't point to anything. So nobody's going to be able to play anything. You won't get any downloads. Say you are advertising or monetizing your podcast, you're not going to be able to do it. So yeah, we have headaches just thinking about all this. And it's why it's so important to make sure your 301 redirect is to the correct URL, which you have already created. Or else you might end up, I don't know, bombing Mars.
So let's say you've triple checked it. Everything is right. Maybe quadruple checked it. I don't know what comes after quadruple, but anyways, you've done that. It's all fine. You're all good to go. What else might you want to do? Well, you are going to want to make sure that you look at your old media host and make sure you keep your old feed in place until you're sure that all of those podcatchers have caught the redirect. Because again, a 301 redirect is a technical way that something is looking at a web link and going, hey, I need to look elsewhere. So you want to make sure things like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Overcast, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pocket Casts, etc., have actually looked at that old location and got that 301 redirect to be able to go to the new location. So that means don't go and instantly get rid of your old location. If you can, try to give yourself a buffer before you cancel that account, just so that you know that that old location of your RSS feed is up long enough that all these other places can read that old location and go, I need to look elsewhere.
You know, I remember about 15 years ago or so when I was listening to advice on this or reading advice on this, they recommended keeping your old feed up for at least 2 or 3 months. I don't know if that's the case anymore. Remember what I said, most places updated within a couple of days. I would at least want what I would say is a monthly billing cycle with one of your podcasts if you're transferring, to make sure that everything is kosher before getting rid of that. And that's true for Spotify for podcasters too. I would keep it up for at least a month, if not 2 months. But you should be good to go in most places in 2 days. Now, there's subtle ways to test this. We hadn't talked about that yet. You can upload a new episode to your new feed and see what podcatchers catch it. You can also just subtly change things, like maybe a title or something in an episode description, and then go look for it and make sure that it has been updated. It will update, by the way, if it's incorrectly. It might take a couple of days for like Podbean or a few of the others, but it should be working just fine. And once you're sure of that, and you have all the data from your old podcast media host provider, then you can consider canceling the account if you get that opportunity. If it shuts down and you only have hours, I haven't heard of this in years, by the way, but if it does shut down, then you're going to be on a timeline. So you might not have that time available. But the bottom line is that the old address needs to exist if that podcatcher or directory is going to get the new location of the RSS feed. Essentially, if something is trying to read your old podcast RSS feed, it needs to access that feed and see the redirect and then find you at your new home and then update that new home in their database. Most do it automatically these days. If your old RSS feed isn't there anymore, there's no redirect for it to read and it can't update the feed. And a lot of media hosts leave the redirect in place after you leave, but that's not a certainty. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis of where you're going from and how long they leave that redirect up. Also, uploading a last chance episode to your old feed after you redirect to catch any stragglers might help with outlier cases. What this means is that after you add the 301 to redirect to your new home, you go and add a new episode to your old home. And what this should do is catch the podcast apps and see if you have your, oh my gosh, I don't know what you wrote there.
That's okay. You can get rid of that. That's fine. Here, I'll take that if you want. Anyways. I was just typing a message to Liberty Dude in the chat. That's all.
I saw that.
He had a good question, and
so I would just go to your single screen and then pick up wherever you want to in that.
Another best practice that you might have is to upload a last chance episode after you do redirect, and this might help catch any stragglers that are somehow looking at the old RSS feed. Doesn't happen often, but this is something that potentially, you know, it might be something that makes you sleep a little better at night. And what you would do is essentially set up the redirect to the new location. And then if you can still do it on your old media host, then you'd go back and publish only to your old media host an episode that says, hey, if you're getting this, something's gone wrong and you need to find me elsewhere. Find me at my new home. Go to this website or go to this place and get the new location of my podcast. Now, the thing that you want to keep in mind with this is that in theory, the redirect should take care of that. And the other thing is some of the media hosts that we reviewed last season don't even allow you to do anything once you've put the redirect on there. So some of the media hosts we found last season don't even let you do a redirect. Some of the media hosts that we've seen don't even allow you to do something like publish to your podcast once you've put the redirect on there. So your mileage may vary a little bit, but this is something that some podcasters have done, again, just to help them sleep a little better at night.
Well, oh my gosh. Now, the last best practice we're going to talk about has to do with the website. Oh my gosh. Now, the last best practice that we're going to discuss today has to do with the website. And unfortunately, we're going to be very vague here and sum it up with one key point. Always think about the future when you're making your site. Have a crystal ball. This is because if you're like us, you may be building your website for a very long period before you change a media host. You may build a brand in a certain location, and you should consider what that impact has on that if you change your media host. For example, if you spent a lot of time refining your media host website to look a certain way, your audience may become very familiar with that experience and feel. It's like a user interface, right? You always get used to what you're using. But your next media host will have their own set of website templates that may not allow you to lay things out in the same way. Maybe not the same color palette, maybe not the same actual look on the screen, or where their episodes are. Are they in the logo? Are they in the logos, or are they actual text blogs? Is it going to meet the needs of your audience? But also, what about the technical aspect? If you have a neutral website, such as a WordPress page, how are you going to handle updating all those links to your individual episodes? The 301 redirect helps redirect your RSS feed, but it doesn't redirect your media. So if somebody tries to access your old MP3 location, they won't get the download anymore. There may be tools that you can use to search and replace. For example, PowerPress will allow you to search for one website address in your media and replace it for another. And for example, if your media is going to be named the same in the end and stored in one location, you may be able to search for the old website address and replace it with a new one, keeping the episode name, whatever that is, .mp3 or whatever your file name is. This can save you time, but it isn't always going to be possible, and we're going to come back to that.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about some specific experiences that we had during our migration that we just wanted to call out here individually. Now, the one thing that we want to start by saying here is that our hope is that by sharing these experiences with you, it will give you a little bit of an expectation of the unexpected things you might come across when doing your migration, because these specific things we're calling out are just a few things that took us a little bit by surprise. And the first thing that we're going to highlight is some random things that went occasionally wrong for us. As we mentioned earlier, there is a bunch of risk that comes when you're importing a larger feed. With the nature of technology, you might occasionally see some bugs, and we did see random inconsistent bugs as we went through. Just to give you an example of this, the episode numbers that were tagged occasionally wouldn't import properly to Pinecast. As well, some of the other fields that were in there occasionally would show up for one way and not show up in other episodes. And we did end up reaching out to Matt in some of these situations, and he was able to re-import some of these and get them to work. Now, these couple things we're mentioning here might be Pinecast specific problems, but the thing is, all technology can fail, and in the end, you are banking on a script, pulling in a bunch of things, doing some things in that script to make it work for the new media host you've chosen, and we think it's likely you'll run into some random issues like we did as well that you just cannot anticipate, so we wanted to make sure to mention that now. The other thing we wanted to call out here is we both thought this was a good opportunity to go and clean up our feeds, didn't we, SP?
Yeah. In the process of migrating our feeds to Pinecast, we decided to take the opportunity to look at the past posts, make sure they imported fine, and do a little cleanup along the way. Cleanup wise, for better podcasting, that consisted of three main things. First, de-amplify things. Years ago, we stripped our episode titles from the names.
Episode numbers.
Yes.
Episode. That's what happens when I don't read back what I type.
First, we were cleanup wise for better podcasting. That consisted of three main things. First, we de-amplified things. Years ago, upon advice from our old media host provider, we stripped our episode numbers from the titles because it was recommended best practice for Apple, or at least some industry voices had you believe. But then along the way, that stopped mattering. So we added them back. So in this step, the goal was to standardize the names by adding back the episode number to the title in a format that matched all the other episodes. Second, we de-birdified everything. For a long time, the Bird platform, and for those that are not catching the reference, we're talking about X/Twitter, I believe is how most people refer to it these days. It was the most interactive place that we had with our audience. As such, a lot of the posts referenced the Bird platform. With the current state of social media being somewhat fractured, it made sense to remove specific social media links and replace it with more generic phrasing that pointed to the social media page on our website. Plus, this is more future-proof. This involved removing a section of the paragraph and pasting in a new paragraph. Now, lastly, we decided to de-oldify the feed. Okay, so it's not really like that, but we like the D trend of the prior 2 points, so we just went with it. So you see, we're a couple of old farts. Yeah. And while we're not quite older than the dinosaurs, well, maybe Steven isn't, we're older than the episode number and season number tags for the RSS feed. Those came about, I believe, in 2016 or 2017 at the Apple Development Conference. So that means that many of our older episodes didn't have the episode tag. They didn't have a season tag either. So this step involved tagging all of these older episodes with the proper episode number and season tag. So it made sense to take the migration as an opportunity to clean up these areas when it was going through and cleaning up the posts on Pinecast. But it was very repetitive, and it remains very repetitive for me on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. As such, Steven used his programmable keyboard in combination with a Stream Deck macro, as well as enabling the Windows clipboard history to minimize the amount of keystrokes necessary. So an efficiencies engineer dream. We'll save you the specifics, but essentially he stored a bunch of text in a bunch of places to make things more one click or just a few clicks as he was going through the steps.
Now, one of the reasons we wanted to call this out right now is because if you are going to migrate, we do want to hammer home. We think it's a really good time for you to look at your existing RSS feed, what's in there, and what can you clean up. We both found this across all of the different shows. There's a bunch of baggage, and if you don't do it during the migration, you're probably not going to go back and do it. And the thing is, because of how different media hosts process posts differently, you might have to go into many of these anyways to clean up or fix a couple things. So it's a good opportunity to look at what you've got, what problems you have in your historical feed, and take the opportunity, as hard as it is, to do that cleanup while you migrate. Now, the last thing we want to talk about in this section here is about the website again. As mentioned earlier, there are tools available depending on the way that you create a website, such as if you use WordPress using PowerPress, to possibly make the migration process easier. With PowerPress, we said you can go in and you can search and replace. Well, for us, that wasn't going to work because we opted on Pinecast, and one of our biggest annoyances with Pinecast is the fact that they are one of the media hosts that we came across that when someone sees the download URL for a file, it is not what you upload. It is different than what you upload. And an example of this is if we were to upload Better Podcasting 303.mp3, it's not going to be listed as that in the download URL. So this meant that every website post we had on the Better Podcasting website and the Gonna Geek website had to be updated to have the new file location on Pinecast. So I ended up finding a bit of a middle ground to make things a little bit easier for myself while updating the websites for Better Podcasting and Gonna Geek. As I went through the RSS feed cleanup, I ended up keeping track of all of the different file locations for each episode. I essentially had a Notepad++ file going that I had the episode number, what it was before. So for example, episode 001.mp3. And then I had it a corresponding link of where episode 1 was on Pinecast. And because I do have the web background and everything, I was able to create a bit of a redirect that did make things a little bit easier to go in and then use the PowerPress search and replace tool. Because the problem with the search and replace tool is it banks on the whole process or the whole link. Right then. The problem with the search and replace tool is it banks on the whole URL matching. And if it doesn't, then it just falls apart because it doesn't know what the new MP3 name is. And that was the problem in ours. So essentially, I went and I created a custom redirect script that could match, for example, the episode 001.mp3. And I have a directory now that is on the Better Podcasting site that if you type in a certain redirect URL, you will be redirected to the new Pinecast location. This is not something everyone's going to be able to do, but it is something I wanted to highlight because even though it made my job a little bit easier thinking outside the box, using the knowledge that I had with websites and redirection and everything, it still was a pain and still was extra work that I had to do in order to get our website up and going, fully functional again. If I didn't have that shortcut that I came up with, I would have had to go into every single WordPress post on Better Podcasting and the Gonna Geek sites and paste in the new Pinecast MP3 link. So I saved myself some time, but it still was a pain.
Another pain point was the Libsyn URLs. So we hosted on Libsyn for many, many years, for over 10 years. And this project helped bring to light that there were multiple Libsyn hosting URLs that we had used throughout that course of Better Podcasting. This was both on the media hosting side and the RSS feed side. On the flip side, we had to search 3 or 4 URLs when searching the WordPress directory to find all the ways the media had been listed. And when inserting the media into our website, we generally just grabbed from the Libsyn dashboard using a copy function. Now, we talked a lot about RSS migration. We also talked a lot about RSS maintenance. And maintaining and transferring your RSS feed isn't all that difficult, but as you heard from us, you need to be careful with it, especially with the 301 redirect. But you shouldn't let the caution needed with transferring your RSS keep you from moving to a better situation if you find one. Also, all of the tips for moving an RSS can be followed to maintain the RSS as well and should be at regular intervals. Keeping your RSS healthy and listed will ensure your show will be distributed as long as the open RSS environment is available and as long as there's podcatchers and podcast destinations to receive it.
And hopefully stop it from rising up and attacking you, right?
Unless it's a transformer toaster, sure.
All right, let's get to the better podnerings this week, and let's start off with some good news. Happy anniversary, SP. This is our 20th anniversary of Better Podcasting, right?
Maybe close, but no cigar. No, we're talking about podcasting being 20 years old. There's a lot of debate on how actual podcasting was created. Yes, there was audio that was being distributed before podcasting was technically created in the fall of 2004. And in the fall of 2004, there were several things that happened in a row to actually create the first podcast. Now, a lot of people attribute the podcast discovery going to Dave Weiner and Adam Curry. There's also the term podcasting was first used by Ben Hammersley. There's also Christopher Lydon, who did a first open source podcast. So there's various different things that happen, but most of the things happen in the late summer and early fall of 2004 for podcasting. And since we are recording this on September 25th, 2024, we're right in that window of the 20th anniversary of podcasting. So happy anniversary, everybody that's listening to this because it's a podcast, or happy anniversary to everybody that's actually podcasting, because this is a momentous occasion. And, you know, Stephen, I was thinking about this. We have been podcasting, both of us, for close to 10, 15 years of that. So at least half or more than half. And podcasting has changed so much in that time period from when we first started to today. And if you're just starting today, let's say if your kids started podcasting or my kids started podcasting, they wouldn't have the the technical background of the pain that we went through in just recording an episode, because now you can just record one on your cell phone. I mean, cell phones didn't exist, the smartphones didn't exist in 2004. So things have changed a little bit, and I think for the better. And I think it's important to remember where he came from, but it's still a very young industry because radio is over 100 years old. And podcasting is only 20. So there's a little bit of dichotomy there going on. Heck, even cable is older than podcasting.
You know, one thing that I was thinking about when reflecting on how podcasting is 20 years old is that, do you remember before podcasting, there was a plethora of internet streams that people would set up? Like, I think Shoutcast was a big one, and it seemed like a lot of people did it. And you know, they illegally did it, of course, because a lot of times they were involved with music, trying to be all radio, right, and whatnot. But there was so many, and then I think they kind of dwindled once podcasting really took off, because it was much more convenient than having to try to listen live.
Yeah, some things never change, though. Doing music within a podcast is still very problematic. Even if you have what is termed as pod-safe music, so to speak, if you have the bulk of your show as music, Spotify just did this within the past week. They went through and culled many, many episodes that were in their service, even if they had pod-safe music in it, because they don't want podcasts in there that are mostly music, or the ones that are like 8 hours long for like sleeping through the night or something like that. They don't want that on their server for whatever reason. So when you're talking about illegal streams back in the day for music, it still kind of persists a little bit. But in this particular case, it was legal, but yet Spotify didn't agree with it. Or maybe they ran into an issue where something wasn't pod safe and they said, well, nuke it all. I don't know what happened, but those issues still persist today. Meanwhile, we're still able to use the great theme of Better Podcasting and all the other music that we use on our shows, because we do go through the proper channels in order to do it that didn't exist for podcasting back in the day.
The next Better Pondering we had is all about a change with the FTC and regulations around illegal or fake reviews. Basically, the FTC announced on October 21st, or announced, wow. Edit.
Hold on, that's not October. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they announced for October.
No, they announced on the 14th of August, and it takes place on October 21st. Okay.
The next Better Pondering we have is all about fake reviews, and it's to do with the FTC regulating on them. Finally, the US FTC announced on August 14th that effective October 21st, it will be illegal to sell or purchase fake consumer reviews and to sell or purchase fake indicators of social media influence, end quote. This includes reviews generated by AI, and also the FTC rule has forbidden companies from paying for either positive or negative reviews to falsely boost a product, or of course, you know, the review bombing as well, practice that sometimes happens. It also forbids marketers from exaggerating their own influence by, for example, paying for bots to inflate their follower count. This is way overdue, and this is me now talking. This is way overdue, and I'm so excited to see this. This is something that I hope they crack down, and they crack down good on this, because so much is unusable now in the way of reviews, or, you know, the whole idea about reviews generated by AI. There is so many sites out there where you're like, hey, I want to look up this news article. Oh, wait, this whole website is just AI garbage. So I am excited to see what happens with this, as long as they crack down and make this something meaningful. And if you're anti this, well, guess what? You got just under a month to do as much bombing as you want, because it's not until the 21st.
I wonder if this would also apply to, say, maybe a company that reports its own statistics and maybe on its own products might not be consistent with how they evaluate all the other customers on their service.
I don't know. That'd be interesting to see if that hypothetical case actually existed. But I guess we'll see what happens. The reason, of course, we wanted to bring this up on Better Podcasting is because I think it's probably pretty reasonable to believe that this sort of thing will translate over to podcast reviews. It might not directly yet, but I think it's probably going to go that way. And unfortunately, it pains us to say we still see people who think that it's a good idea to launch a podcast and pay a service for fake reviews and all these other fake ways of inflating their stats. So don't do that.
Sad to say, there's still that launch strategy where you want to get into new and noteworthy on Apple Podcasts. In order to do that, you just have to have
new and noteworthy, more like new and unnoteworthy. Haha.
Right. I don't know what that gets you even, but there's strategies out there to do that even today. And I just scratch my head over whether it's worth it or not. Anyway, we'll move on to the next news story that we're going to talk about, and that is Apple Podcasts announced a web version. This is important because not only if you're on a PC can you play podcasts through it, but also you can access Apple Podcasts through Android devices now as well, whether they're mobile devices, phones, or tablets or whatever. It's on the web. It's not an app, but it is possible to do it. I think it possibly takes the place of Google Podcasts in the web version, because I really haven't found anything on the web version that's like what Google Podcasts used to be. You do need to sign in to listen to Not Safe for Work podcasts, and signing in will then sync with the rest of your library if you happen to have an Apple Podcast library. And as I said, it is available on non-Apple devices, not only Android, but everything else that you can actually surf the web on. So I think this is an interesting move forward. We'll see how long Apple keeps this web access going.
I want to say that I think this is an indicator that they're feeling the market pull away from them. And this is a new avenue they're looking at to possibly get some people back. And I think it's smart on them. And I hope that I'm right on that, because I think that is always a good thing when there's multiple big players in the podcast directories and whatnot. And so I like this. I like this a lot.
They're still the main player. They have 45% the last that I saw.
45% though? That's like nothing compared to where they used to be.
I agree. It used to be 60 or higher. It is 45% now, which is still the biggest out of them, but it is eroded. Absolutely. And I like the fact that it's eroded, to be honest with you, because I like the multiple competition, because competition brings innovation and that just makes it better for us. I also, since we're on Better Podcasting, I always worry about these podcast directories being closed off like a pay to play sort of situation. And I hope that never happens, but it definitely could happen at one point in time, because it does take these companies money to actually keep these services running, just to have an app in the App Store or to have the service like a website that runs everything. So I don't know. I always keep my ear to the ground to try to, predict if it's really going to happen or not. Let me be clear. I have heard nothing about a pay to play for main podcast directories, but it is always my fear, especially for hobby podcasters, because we don't have money to pay and play.
Now, the last thing we wanted to talk about in the Better Podnerings is Rode's announcement that they teased. It's the Rodecaster video. And this is something that is, it's a video console, basically. And the idea being you can do video streaming and whatnot through hardware, rather than having to do all the difficult software things like we do with OBS and whatnot. But it is really targeted towards someone doing it in person, because that's the idea of it, is the physical inputs into the video. And then it does incorporate some of the audio things that you've come to know on the Rodecaster Pro 2 specifically. So there are some audio things in there as well. It's really, at this point, I think fair to say they're targeting a base that isn't your average introductory podcaster or hobby podcaster. And I say introductory podcaster or hobby podcaster specifically because it is a steep price they've put on it. It's a $1,200 price tag. The features are going to be very specific for in-person podcasts. And a lot of new podcasts that are out there aren't doing that anymore. So I think there's a certain market here that they're looking to meet. I have concerns based off of your problems with the Rodecaster Pro 2. I believe the Streamer X, which I believe was their first video console idea that they had, also had some issues. So we'll see what happens. There's going to be a market for this. I think when people look at the price tag of the Rodecaster Pro 2, there was a lot of criticism up front about that. And I think that in the end, there was a market for that as well. There is a market for certain things, even with high price tags, but I don't see us talking much about this on this podcast. I just don't see where it really fits into the hobbyist budget.
It does have limitations. Right now it's 1080 only. I don't know if it has the capability to go up to 4K, but it's only 1080. It has, I believe, 4 HDMI inputs. It has several USB-C inputs, which you can throw a webcam into at least 2 of the ports, USB-C ports. But it only has 2 of the audio combo jacks into it. They do allow daisy chaining a Rode device, so a Duo or a Rodecaster Pro 2 into the system via the USB-C inputs. So you can have, I don't know if it's up to 6 microphone inputs, but you definitely can have up to 4 if you have both. That just drives up the price even more, by the way. So you're paying $1,200 for this, and then whatever you're paying for a Rodecaster Pro 2 in order to get that capability. It also has the ability to do Bluetooth microphones and the USB-C microphone inputs. So it does have a lot of capabilities, but that 1080 only, at least right now, is very limiting, I think. Because if you are a influencer, I think most of them would want to at least record up to the 4K. Also, you would have to use a sole monitor for it. It's basically a separate computer. And if you wanted to look at the outputs, you need a separate monitor for that. I think if you were a group of hobby podcasters, maybe you were doing an in-person play podcast, that you would want to do switching back and forth between multiple cameras if you had them. Oh, by the way, HDMI inputs on cameras mean it's going to be expensive. 4K cameras is going to run, $8,000, $10,000. And I'm not kidding. It's going to be expensive. And there's lighting to consider. Video just is an incredibly higher cost and work ratio to it. But if you wanted to do something like Critical Role, and you wanted to do it just with your buddies and you wanted to make it quote unquote easy, this could be a way to do it, but it's only going to be 1080. I keep on bringing it up. 1080, that kind of stuck in my craw. And there's no way to record the multiple incoming video streams. I think it's just what you connect on the device itself. So if you're doing something like we do here on Better Podcasting, or if you use like Riverside or StreamYard or any one of those video capable streaming and recording services, you're going to find better capability there right now than you would using this. I agree with Steven. It has a market. You're going to find high-level influencers that love to do this. You're going to find video-savvy people like Steven who love to produce in real time that might use a Stream Deck. They'll love this sort of thing if they have the money for it. And let's face it, Steven, since we're older, people like us might actually have the money to do this because they pay a lot of money for some of their other hobbies. So some hobbyists could do this, but I think your average hobbyist that we talk to here on Better Podcasting isn't going to be able to afford this sort of capability because it's not just this, it's everything else that comes with it. I mean, heck, you and I are both rocking our USB webcams. We don't have, the HDMI inputs on a mirror camera or mirrorless camera or whatever. So I applaud Rode for taking this step. I think they will iterate, and in iteration 2 or 3, they will find something that's more ubiquitous. Maybe they'll come up with like a Duo version that's more applicable to hobbyists like we are. It'll still be expensive, but maybe it'll be more palatable.
I think it's a good reminder that Rode is not the Rode of the Rodecaster Pro 1 generation. When the Rodecaster Pro 1 generation, I think they were talking to a lot of average podcasters of different levels. They're looking to appeal to that And the reality is the Rodecaster Pro 1 went into all sorts of markets than I think most people anticipated. And now the Rodecaster Pro 2 has done that. And there's, similar products that are I think, elevated beyond what you would assume, an average podcaster would be. They're used in all sorts of random professional setups now and whatnot. And so I think that just because Rode is going to release a product, you shouldn't always be thinking, how is this going to apply to me? Or you should be thinking that's the case because Rode has a huge reach and they are making products for a lot of different levels. And their next device might not be for you. It might be for the professional streamer that has a huge amount of podcasts, that has multiple producers and things like that. So just know it might not be something that you're interested in, and that's okay if Rode is creating a new product.
Indeed. So that's all the news that we have for this week. If you have a news article that you wish us to talk about, just drop it in our Discord or get to one of us individually, and we'll make sure it makes it in the show next time if we have space for it. And we generally do. So we look forward to hearing what you want us to discuss. And talking about you, Stephen.
This is where we here at Better Podcasting turn the show over to you as we run through some of your feedback. We call this segment Better Pod Back.
Let's kick off the Better Pod Back with a follow-up to our teaser last week that came from Jonesy. Jonesy came to our Discord and said, "Hey guys, it's been a while. Glad you're back from the break. Our show has used the pro version of StreamYard for a couple years or more, so this is disappointing. Our needs and wants fall in between their core and advanced offerings, but it's not worth jumping from an already high $64 per month to $90 per month. So we'll cut back in some areas and move down a tier to core. The overall offerings is still really nice. And as you guys mentioned in the show, it's super convenient for chat, ease of features, individual tracks, and stream destinations. But I find their video compression to be lacking at 1080p. In particular, I explored EVMux a while back, so that's an alternative we might consider if this doesn't pan out. But I don't think the overall offering at their $45 tier is better, just a little different and poses other challenges. We try to keep it simple since we have multiple hosts for our overall live stream suite of episodes, so that hamstrings us a bit from using an OBS or similar work stream." And this was a comment about the StreamYard price increase that we mentioned last week.
Yeah, I've been looking around, poking around at different things and just seeing what's available. I also explored OBS and Video Ninja a little bit more in depth. Still not comfortable enough to use it this next week in my production, but time's starting to run out. I do have backup plan. The backup plan, by the way, which I don't think we discussed last time, is Discord. I can just record an episode in Discord and not worry about the video in there. And the recording, all my co-hosts do it on their own, either on their machines or they have off-board recording devices that I can use the files from, and then we transfer the files afterwards, basically what's known as a multi-ender. So we'll see what happens here. For those that are power users of StreamYard, I really feel for you because you put a lot into this capability. You might want to look at a couple other capabilities. I know I mentioned like Riverside and Descript is another one, but I'm not sure about their streaming. Restream has a stream capability. So it really depends on what you need to do. Do you need to stream or just record? And then if you need like an editing capability, then you're talking about like the Squadcast to Script combination. It's all really depends on what you're doing and how much money that you have. I think OBS and Video Ninja, if you have a powerful enough machine, either Windows or Mac, is a winning option for most hobbyists. It's just going to take, it's not going to be as easy as StreamYard. It's going to take some effort for you to know how to do it. And as Stephen has found out throughout the years, it doesn't always go to plan. So Be prepared for that as well.
We also, in our live chat following up to this, we had Liberty Dude say last week you discussed price hikes in StreamYard. Does Ecamm Live have the same price prohibitive plans? Do you know anything about that?
I'm sorry. I was reading something.
Do you know anything about Ecamm Live plans?
Okay. Ecamm Live. No, I don't know anything about Ecamm. I have not looked into that. I will look into it, though. I did see that in our chat come across. So good question. I just don't have any reference on if they've increased their prices and what their plans actually include now. So we'll see. I did look at eCaster, which I believe is different than Ecamm. And while they don't have a video record option, they do have a video display option, so you can at least see the person that you're talking to. And you could use something like OBS to capture that screen. It's not optimal, but it's possible. So I might even take a look at that as well. But I will look at Ecamm this week and get back to you, Liberty Dude.
And the next topic we wanted to mention here, or the next piece of feedback, was about the Rode Videocaster. We had Damien the DM comment about it, saying, "Fool me 4.5 times. Shame on, well, someone maybe." And I think this was just about the many Rodecaster Pro 2 problems you have experienced, SP.
I am looking forward to the next generation, as we said before, of the mixer recorder. I really like the capability. I'm like even the format of the Rodecaster Pro 2. I do not like the issues that I've run into. And just to recap, for those that might be hearing this for the first time, I've run into issues with the sound pads where they've just gone off on their own. I've gotten a refurbished unit back that also had issues. I had issues with it powering on and it bricking on power on. I've had issues with it once I pressed record and it bricking itself and actually screwing up the audio on my machine. And so I have to reboot both my machine and the Rodecaster Pro 2. So there have been issues with this. And that's why I'm looking for the next generation. Even if it's a Rode product, as long as they promise it'll be more stable, I don't know if I believe that or not, but I might actually look into that. They've had a lot of time to advance their algorithms, including with the Rodecaster Video. That's actually one of the reasons why they're only doing 1080 with the Rodecaster Video, is they want it to be a more stable platform in order to use all the capabilities on it. They could probably work just fine with 4K if all you want was a dumb switcher and streamer, but they I don't know. It's just very aggravating to me. And unfortunately, Rode bought out their main competition with Mackie, so the DLZ creator is now really a Rode creator. And I'm not sure if those two are going to combine into something going forward. I know a lot of people want a smaller fit form, so something like the Duo or the DLZ creator. What was that, Lite? XS. I know a lot of people like that format better for their desks. I'm fine with a bigger format as long as it's not too big, because it still has to fit on my desk. And I do like having the 4 microphone inputs. I wish it was 6, but I only have the 4. So yeah, lots of stuff going on. And yes, Damien, I won't say I was fooled with this. The capabilities sold me, and when it works, the capabilities are phenomenal. But the support has been okay, and then the capability has just not worked. From talking about not working capabilities with OBS and Video Ninja, this thing has just flat out not worked from time to time. So yeah, a little summation of that, I guess. Sorry for the tangent.
And the last piece of Better Podback we had, you went actually in the Discord this week, SP, and you said, "Today I delete my first of 5 Libsyn accounts." And Chris Farrell came in and said, "Does it feel liberating?" And then Yakko came in and said, "Liberated separation?" ? Those were genius, and they needed a call out. I laughed so hard with both of those.
I did too. That was really cool that they came in on that. Yeah, the first show I think that I moved over and deleted, I think, was Voices of Defiance, and that was my very first podcast. So that had some emotional baggage with it, by the way. My very first podcast, still on its media host after all these years, and I moved it to a new media host provider. I was like, "Aw." And in doing so, by the way, there was something that happened on that old feed that wouldn't transfer over. Remember, Steven, back in the day when you could put files that weren't audio files into an RSS feed? I had a PDF file that was downloaded. It was a download gift for everybody. It was like a Monopoly style game that we put together for Defiance, and that was downloadable on Libsyn at one point in time. I don't know when that stopped. They never informed me that it stopped, but it had stopped somewhere along the lines. So if you're going to put a non-audio file in there for your audience, you're going to have to host it somewhere else, put it on some sort of shared drive or whatever, and have a URL towards it. Or if you have a website, you can put it on the website for download. But you're not going to be able to put it in your RSS feed. And that was the day that I was like, oh, this capability goes away. It's no more. There's an episode literally in the feed that wouldn't import over, and that's the episode. It was not an episode. It was the PDF file.
They were probably going to tell you that feature was gone when they finished Libsyn 5.
I'm laughing because it's probably true.
But that's going to take us towards the end of the show. If you would like to chat about podcasting, find us on any of our social media. You can find that over at betterpodcasting.com/contact. You can find our whole back catalog of episodes, including the temporarily / long-term / probably permanently closed Better Podcasting live chat, as well as the on hiatus, and maybe we'll eventually come back, Better Podcasting chats with SP. Go to betterpodcasting.com. As well, you can come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, because we would love to have you chat with us over there. There's a lot of awesome people there. That is actually the Gonna Geek server, so there's lots of other non-podcasting talk in there, but there's lots of podcasting talk in there also. And hey, if you would like SP to tell you when he has moved his last accounts from Libsyn, you should come to betterpodcasting.com/Discord and tell him you want to know. He'll put you on a special mailing list.
I'll just post it in there. It's going to be a while too, because I'm verifying over 500 episodes. Hey, next time we're going to be discussing the episode description. So if you have any questions about the episode description, please let us know. If you have any comments about your maybe episode description best practices that you've learned along the way, we'll include them in our episode for next week. I already started drafting the show notes, so we're going to have a good show next week. In the meantime, I know this has been a long show. We apologize for it at the beginning of the show. We've hoped you enjoyed it. We love coming back. We love hearing back from you guys. I don't know how many people reached out to us after our teaser episode. It was great to see.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming back and downloading and listening and playing along with us. We really appreciate it. There is no other place in the internet that talks about hobby podcasting.
So for episode number 304 of Better Podcasting, I'm Steven saying it's migrated. It's finally migrated.
And I'm SP saying, I still need to migrate. I'm still coming, guys. It's still moving. All right. See you everybody next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageeknetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen Jondrew. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming on by.
Yeah, Damon, I thumbs up your comment there on the file that you put on your website, and hoping it doesn't get hit too hard. I understand that.
Yeah.
Usually for hobby podcasters, that's not a huge issue just because the audience size. But yeah, if I was like, I don't know, if I was the Kelsey brothers, I would worry about putting something on a website.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for coming on by. We hope you had yourself a fun time. At the moment, we're still scheduled for 4:15 p.m. Pacific next week. That is 7:15 p.m. Eastern. Still waiting on some information on my end. We'll see what happens.
Probably should be a shorter show next week. So just
Yay.
if you
I mean,
hang in there with us, it probably will be half an hour shorter. Or so.
Okay,
We'll
bye.
see. Bye. Yeah.
I was just being a jerk. Goodbye.